Hello, everyone. Today we have our special guest, Susie Pattison, and we bring her on here. This podcast is to showcase the top realtors in Columbus, and we're very honored to have you come on. We understand super busy. You have a lot of things to deal with, and we appreciate your time coming out here.
Oh, well, thank you for having me. It's a good opportunity.
Yeah, and I wanted to start from the very beginning of your journey because I was doing some research on you. You have a lot of different career opportunities where you could have stuck with this thing or one industry, and you have finally found your calling for real estate. And I'm very interested how you found that because a lot of people think, oh, I'm going to college, I'm going to do this, and then I'm going to be this for the rest of my life. But you didn't take that approach. So you went to Miami.
Hmm.
You started in 2001, finished in 2005. You got career in entrepreneurship and management. Is that correct?
Yes, that is correct.
And you were, I think I'm going to mispronounce this. It's summa cum laude, right?
Yep, summa cum laude.
Yeah, for top students.
Yeah.
So so you have that career, but earlier on in your life, was there anything that was making you think like, hey, eventually I'm going to be a real estate agent? Or did you have any plans before that? Like, I'm going to go into like corporate. How'd you approach it?
Yeah, I mean, I think, growing up, the entrepreneurial mindset was always with me. My dad ran a business unrelated to real estate. And I think just, when I look to what did I do as a kid to make money, it was definitely not the like some of my friends, they served at a restaurant or something. They went in, Monday, Tuesday, Wednesday, Thursday, Friday. And I never really took that approach. It was,
Mm.
I was babysitting or I was delivering the weekly newspaper or working at events for a catering company, something that was always a little bit more in my schedule, and kind of figured out those ways to make money, but not necessarily the consistent job. And I think a lot of that kind of leads to I love that entrepreneurial side of it.
Mhm.
Um, and so, yeah, when I went to college, I majored in management and entrepreneurship. And that was just a great way to further expose myself to what really was being an entrepreneur and how do you run a business and kind of engaging and being part of like-minded individuals in different groups and in the classes. And, it sounds a little bit silly, but I was the president of the entrepreneurial club, which,
Mhm.
yeah, sounds a little, dorky maybe, but it was just a great way to, engage with others that kind of had those same goals about being able to work for themselves and run their own businesses. So, yeah, no real estate exposure earlier in my life until I got here years later. But I would say, I did purchase a condo when I was 25. My husband and I built our first house at 28. And then I technically, well before real estate, had my first real estate transaction when I thought it was a really smart approach to try to do a for sale by owner of my condo,
Oh, really?
which worked out just fine. I put it on Craigslist and was able to make that deal happen, but, now that I'm in the industry, it's quite cringeworthy looking back to think that I somehow thought I knew how to sell a property. Nothing I advise to anybody, but that was pretty much the only exposure I had to real estate, early on in the years.
And then from there, you go on to Abercrombie. You're working there for a couple of years. And what was your reason to quit that job? Because I looked at it, you were there for a decent amount of years.
Mhm.
From what it looked like, it seemed like a stable job. And you moved on to actually a nonprofit, Pelotonia. Is that correct?
Yes.
And I'm interested, what made you decide to do that?
Yeah, so I started at Abercrombie& and Fitch, actually was a merchant straight out of college, and at that time, it was kind of a dream job. You're wearing flip-flops and the sweatshirts and the clothes and working with people that are all your age, your young 20s that like to go out together, kind of that work hard, play hard mentality. I started, quickly thereafter joining Abercrombie, in retail finance specifically, and really enjoyed the job, liked going to work every day, and was there for 6 years. But kind of as I neared the end of that, it was more about that itch to do something more. And, coming from a college graduate, going to that kind of corporate world is the next natural step. But it just seemed to me that I really wanted to be a little more fulfilled in my day to day. So I could, have easily done finance for my entire career for the rest of my career, but I just wasn't kind of getting that itch to give back to others, and or that wasn't being fulfilled by the working for myself and having that entrepreneurial bug kind of, being fulfilled in that way. So there was, at the time, Pelotonia, which is a nonprofit that raises money for cancer research here at The Ohio State University Comprehensive Cancer Center. It was a new nonprofit. It was just about a year in, and I'd kind of tracked it and was just engaged. Always have kind of been a philanthropic person that likes to get involved in organizations and give, my time and my money to invest in those things that I care deeply about. So I'd kind of watched it and followed along, and there was 5 people that worked for it at the time, so it's a very small startup company, or nonprofit, I should say, and, kind of just had the opportunity to learn a little bit more about them, and next thing I know, they offered me a position and said, "We're actually looking to hire somebody," which never where I thought that conversation was really headed. It was more about just wanting to learn about Pelotonia initially at the beginning. And it was one of those things that I was kind of at this pivotal moment that do I leave my stable, career corporate job that I'm doing very well at and take a pay cut and go to this new nonprofit that has 5 people working there and doesn't have the support and the systems that, I currently am in my role. But it just felt right. It felt like this is your opportunity to give back and get engaged and come into this philanthropic world. So I did. I took the leap, and I kind of felt that there was always that safety net that I could go back to retail if it was something that didn't work out. But as soon as I got there, I just knew that that was where I was supposed to be, and it was a great spot for me.
Were you married at that time, or you haven't met your husband yet?
Actually, we had just gotten engaged, so he was working at Abercrombie as well, which is where we met, and, we got engaged a few months prior, and then I decided to leave and to go work in the nonprofit world.
Okay, and then you guys haven't had kids yet, so it's not such a scary jump. I mean, it's
Ye
still big, but it's not like, "Oh my gosh, like, I also have the kids to worry about."
Yes, exactly. It was a little bit of a crazy year. Like I said, we got engaged. So in 2011, when I left the job and started Pelotonia, he actually left Abercrombie and went to a different retailer. And then we decided to start building a house. We were planning our wedding. So it was a little bit of different craziness, but not the stress of financially about trying to, yeah, have to, you know,
Mm,
make everything work for a full family. A little bit less was on the line at the time.
yeah, and then can you go into depth what you did at Pelotonia, and what made you decide that it's time to move on from there to real estate?
Yeah. So when I started at Pelotonia, like I said, there was just 5 of us, and the role that I was hired into was actually a new role. And that's one of the things that was really exciting to me is that I got to kind of make that role and form that role. I mean, I knew that my job, it was the director of rider recruitment and stewardship. So it's to go out and Pelotonia, the premise of it is to bring people in as cyclists, so riders out there, and they raise money when they commit to a certain amount, volunteers or virtual riders. And so my job was to get out there and go to all the companies and communities in town and get people engaged and excited about participating, where as a result, we would then raise more money for cancer research. So I kind of got to craft that job and shape it how I liked it and how it was, I thought it was going to, achieve the best results, obviously with the team and our fantastic board members behind me and kind of figuring out what that approach was going to be. Um, but what I then learned is it be very much became a very relationship based business. So uh, I was out there meeting individuals and just trying to get them to get excited about joining in Pelotonia. But at the same time, I was celebrating birthdays with them and learning about, weddings and children being born. So I was with these people. I was at Pelotonia for 8 years. So you're seeing these life changes happen for people, and you're so vested in it because you truly and genuinely care about all these individuals because they've now become a part of our greater Pelotonia community. So it was just such a dream job in so many ways that I got to spend time, just engaging with others and creating these great relationships. And ultimately the result was, raising money for cancer research. But there became a point that, there was only so much room to grow at a small organization. There was still only so many positions to be had. And after doing it for 8 years, I did feel like it was time to, not that I wanted to leave, I loved everything about it, but to continue to challenge myself and evolve my career, that it was probably time to find what that next step was. knowing that I could still stay engaged with Pelotonia as my own rider and volunteer. I did some emceeing at the finish lines for a few years after that. So I didn't feel like I had to totally leave it behind, but I
Mm,
felt for my day to day, it was time to figure out what was next. And so from there, I mean, the lucky thing is I, at that point, had met thousands of people and I had a lot of people to network with and just kind of ask opinions of, opportunities or looking at what that next step could be. And, my first thought was, oh, naturally, I'm going to go back to retail. I'm going to go back to the finance world. But then I got started thinking about that's really what I was getting away from. I was looking to not be at that desk job and have that entrepreneurial side of me. Going to a nonprofit could have been another opportunity, but I will say at Peloton, we were really graced with some great funding partners and we had a lot of opportunity and didn't have as many of the struggles that some smaller nonprofits have. So I was kind of just open to anything and thinking what that could look like. And one person I went and networked with was the individual that sold me my first condo, my realtor, and she thought I was coming to lunch with her to tell her I wanted to get into real estate, and that was nowhere in the realm of my thoughts. So I'm sitting there thinking, whoa, 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 like slow down. This is not what we're here to talk about. At the time, I had two-year-old twin girls at home, so we had our girls during those years that I was at Pelotonia, and we were talking about what's on the line. Now I felt, well, gosh, I mean, now I have a whole family to support,
yeah.
and, going into a commission-based, business just seemed, a little bit frightening, to be honest. So we left that lunch, and I assured her that, "Thank you for your time, but real estate is not what my next step is going to be."
Mhm.
Um, and, continue to kinda think things through over the following months, and then things kept coming back to real estate, and a lot of it was my husband thinking, there's a lot of parallels here. You've spent all of these years, like, building these great relationships, and what is real estate? Real estate is really about a relationship business and have people trust you, and they were trusting you in one way to guide you through this nonprofit. Now you could guide people in another way. And so the more we talked about it, it just seemed like it was worth an opportunity to, at least give it a shot. And my husband, ironically, had actually looked into going into real estate. At that time, it probably would have been about maybe 6 or 7 years before. And that was when we were looking to start a family and we thought the timing wasn't right. But with his blessing, he kept emphasizing, I actually think you'd be the better one at it. I mean,
Real.
he's not from Columbus. I grew up in Dublin, and at the time we were living in Upper Arlington. So I had, my sphere was from my childhood all the way up through the current time. So yeah, so we kind of just decided that it was going to be something we give a shot. And if it didn't work out, then, could pivot and make a different change. So yeah, kind of a to get to real estate, interesting career path from the corporate world to the nonprofit, and then ultimately getting to where I am now.
Yeah, and it's amazing how, like, I look at your journey, and it seems like completely random things, like, not related, like, you go to college, you go to corporate, nonprofit, and all 3 of those aspects, they help build you into the realtor that you are today,
Yeah.
and that's really impressive because a lot of times, like, people are like, "Oh, if you're trying to be an entrepreneur, don't go to college." You went to college, you did the corporate job, and now you're succeeding as a realtor.
Yeah, it's funny you say that because I do. I look at my career path as very disjointed and kind of all over the place. But then when I look back, I don't think I would have been successful if any of those steps hadn't have happened. I mean, I built my business, how to run a business understanding when I was in my corporate role and kind of the management side of things. And then when I went to Pelotonia, it was more of that total grassroots, scrappy, like you're running a business in a very different way than you were in the corporate world. So it's way more relevant to what I do now is because, being a one-man show versus, having all these different departments and stuff supporting you, finance department, HR department, and all of that, learning in that way and in such a grassroots way that, each of those pieces of the puzzle have kind of played into enabling my career here today to, I think, work a little bit better than maybe it would have if one of those pieces was missing.
And now we're onto your real estate journey, and I'm always amazed by this statistic. I love to say it every single episode that I do. 70% of real estate agents will not sell a house this year. Or I think this would be for last year. You last year sold $28 million. How do you do it? And what makes you stand out? And what was your journey to get to that point?
Yeah, so, it's been a little crazy. I guess I'll start with the journey piece first. So when I first started in real estate, when I was living in Pelotonia, I was, feel very grateful, but I was brought on, by Marilyn Vutek and Jeff Ruff into the Vutek and Ruff team. Very high selling, team with just great rapport in the industry. I mean, nobody does better business than that group of individuals. So for them to welcome me on and to be able to have that support and really be mentored by some of the best in the business, I think gave me this huge jump ahead right from the start because I could be there at the office every day and hearing the conversations of the great team members and having their support and someone to ask a question to, which now that I'm an independent agent, sometimes you don't have those people to just look next to and ask that question to and know that they have decades of experience to answer you. So I think, starting out in the team that I did definitely gave me that like leap ahead. Loved working with the VTech and Ref team. Every member there, became quickly like family as we, kind of went through the crazy times of real estate during COVID and real estate after that and all the changes that we've seen in the last, couple of years. So yeah, starting on the team I think was the right approach for me. Couple years after we were changing brokerages as the team and decided that it was just time for me to kind of break off and try my independent career. And, it was hard. Like I said, I really enjoyed being a part of that team, but just thought, if I really want to truly try this on my own, I thought now was the time because we were already changing brokerages. So that would have been, let's see, 2 years ago at this point. And I think that was, felt very risky at the time. I had this, great base. Everything was working just great. Why am I changing it? But I just felt like I wanted to give it a shot. So I broke off and surprising to me, I didn't think this would happen, but my business doubled that year.
Oh, wow.
And yeah, so it was, I think the right move at the right time for me. And, I just really wanted at that point, my mindset was just head down, like, let's get through this. I need some consistency. We changed brokers as a team 2 times, and then breaking off was just a lot of change in a couple of years for me. But I got about 6 months into that and was kind of waving the red flag, like, I was just swamped, I needed some support, I needed to figure out what that was, and my husband had easily identified, like, you need to have some support. And, we started talking about it, and he was still in the retail finance world and was just ready to maybe break off, and we said, if we're gonna do this and have you come into real estate, now's the time. Like, otherwise, if I'm hiring somebody else or if I'm gonna get another team member, it's gonna be a lot harder to integrate a family member into that after the fact. So, we had the conversation, and within a week, he left his job, and, he'd been in retail for 18 years, and we thought, "Let's give this a try." So, yeah. So it was, I think I was a very nice, new boss and let him take the summer off and enjoy some time before he jumped into the crazy world of real estate. But he got his license about 5 months after he left his job, and at this point now, that was about a year and a half ago. So he and I have been a team member since. So Pattison Group is the two of us. And it's just been a really great change for our family. So the business grew another 30% that first year that he was still getting up and running. So we don't even look at it as really like a full year of him being an up and running full-time real estate agent. And he's just picked it up so well. And it's just been a great balance for not just our professional life, but for our family life as well.
I'm interested in what makes you succeed so rapidly because I've talked with many realtors, and a lot of realtors that are at your level, I will be talking with them, and it's like, okay, it makes sense. 20 years experience, 30, 15 years of experience. But for you, it seems like your growth, like the way you talked about it, you left that team, doubled the business, added on your husband to the team, 30% increase. What are you doing differently, you think, that other realtors are missing out on that kind of growth that you have?
Yeah. Like I said, I really do give a lot of credit to VTech and Rough for setting me up for success and truly understanding, um, the genuine and ethical way to run a business, and, so I do give a lot of credit back to that. Um, I think that a lot of, my sphere, which I hadn't seen initially, and others had to kind of my husband is specifically when we were talking about going into real estate to start, was the fact that Pelotonia, I didn't realize was gonna become such a large part of my business. So, those relationships that I nurtured for those 8 years, never thinking that I was ever gonna be in a sales job, have really kind of come with me, and that's been a great way to stay connected to that. And I think that really speaks a lot to it is we look at our business as, it's relationship driven. So everything I do is, play the long game. It is definitely about what you're doing now. You might not see those results in the next 3 months or the next 6 months, but, you know, in a year or in 3 years, that person that you've built this great relationship with, you might get a referral from them, or they might need to sell their house, or they might have a child that's looking to purchase a home. So, we very much, part of our mission statement is looking at things as we are relationship driven. We are not transaction based. We don't think of anything as a transaction. It's more about, like I know you shared the numbers, and sales volume is always, a great thing to track, and it's one metric to look at. But we've really shifted our mindset to how many families can we help every year? How many individuals can we help every year? Because truly, that's where I get the joy out of doing what we do is those individuals we meet and seeing them, whether it's a life stage change for them or it's that first home purchase, just really, I think shifting a mindset from how do I find my next sale for maybe a newer agent? And I get that, yes, financially, everybody needs to be able to make those sales to make the numbers work and live their life. But switching from that mindset to just let's build relationships and let's fit our business into our lifestyle. So, we talked about being a philanthropic person, and myself and now my entire family, we like to give back in a lot of ways. And in doing so, it's like the ultimate goal of doing that is to really feel good, teach our children about being philanthropic. Um, and enjoy what we're doing. But naturally, there could be business things that come out of it as well. But once again, that's going to be the long game of finding something that's going to support and affect your business. But I really think it's that mindset shift that is just, how can we help people versus how can we find that next sale or, when's that next commission going to come?
Okay, I wanted to go back to something you said. You said when you left your team and now you're out on your own, you said that you were feeling swamped at the very beginning and you added on your husband. And I'm interested, did you have any debates like maybe I should go back to retail, maybe I should go back to the nonprofit? Or was it like we're plowing ahead, hop on, let's go, this train is moving?
Yeah, definitely the latter. Even though, I felt swamped, it was such a good way. Like, I love what I do, and, I also have the personality that I'm just totally okay with going 100 miles an hour, like, constantly. So, and at the time, it was I feel like life always has a lot, that you're gonna can easily feel swamped in a lot of ways. I mentioned the year that we changed jobs, we're building a house, got married. I look back to COVID where real estate actually went gangbusters, and I also we pulled our daughters out of daycare, and I was trying to be, teacher during the day. My husband was stuck in his office for like 15 hours straight trying to figure out with shopping malls closed what retail looked like, and so crazy in a different way, but, I feel like there's always something that is gonna fill your time and make life feel a little crazy, but no, there was never a question of, like, that at that point, I knew, like, I love this job, and it's just more of how can we make it work so that I can get the support I needed, and, he was the perfect one to fulfill that need. Now it's, I think constantly people talk about, like, work-life balance in real estate, and it's a hard one because, you know, like, when someone reaches out and say, "Oh gosh, you must have so much flexibility," and it's like, well, I mean, I gain a little bit of flexibility maybe, but at the same time, you lose a lot of flexibility because you're working when your clients are available, which is, the nights and the weekends or at any given moment that your phone starts ringing. So I think it's helped that at least we are on the same schedule now, whereas before he'd be gone at the office all day, maybe get home at 7 o'clock, and I'm like, "See you later. I've gotta get to a showing." and it was a lot of kind of handoff of the children, but now, we feel so grateful that we can walk to the bus stop and get the girls off the bus stop, and then, yeah, maybe that night one of us needs to run to a showing, we might have to, take calls, but being able to kind of balance that between the 2 of us has really made it seem so much more sustainable, and, um, I think everyone can always improve their work-life balance, but at the same time, it's what works for us, and the girls now truly understand, like, what real estate is because we're both doing it, and they get, so excited. They hear our conversations, we might be out at a walk after dinner, and, to hear them the next be like, "Oh, yeah, what about," they mention that client's name or something, and it's funny to hear, like, their little minds kind of, already, thinking about things and just kind of starting to understand what we really do every day.
And you talk about this love of real estate, how you love the industry. Was there a moment, like a story where when you were maybe on the team where you were like, "This is it, like, this is my thing?" Or were you hesitant at all when you were on that team at first as a realtor, or were you just like, "I'm all in"?
You know, I think I'm all in. We went into it, and my husband was very great and said, I'm the nervous Nelly over here saying, "Well, gosh, what if I don't sell a single transaction my first year?" And he's like, "It's okay, because I don't think that's gonna happen, but if it does, like, we're gonna survive." So, I think when I started to see, people reaching out to me and feeling that they could trust a new agent in those early years, it started to feel more and more like the right step right away, just because with how much I loved it and being able to work with people that I love meeting new people. So having that mix of being the people you already know and seeing them on a different side that, maybe you've been at a sports field with them before, but you've never really gotten to delve into like their real estate journey with them. So get to learn someone you already know in a different way, or just meet someone completely new and have them become a friend down the road. I just love that. It's just kind of like one thing I loved about Pelotonia is always getting to meet new people. And, you walk into the grocery store and if people always laugh, like, of course, Susie's going to know someone here. You run in for milk and you saw 3 people that you knew. But that's what I love is just, getting to further engage in our community in a different way. So I think that pretty quickly I knew that it was a job that I was, going to fall in love with.
I'm really interested just because you talk about how much you love to talk to people and connect with people, and I wanna go all the way back in the past.
Yeah.
Childhood, like, teenage years, were you always like that, where you were constantly, like, talking with people, wanting to, like, become friends with everyone? Or were you different? I'm very interested how.
I'm laughing because it's like I staged you with this question or something, but no, I was an incredibly shy child. I mean, I remember I would sit in an elementary school classroom, and when they would do roll call, and my maiden name started with an S, and I would sit there from A to S with the anxiety building. And all I had to do was say here and like raise my hand, and that's all I had to do, and it was like a full 5 minutes of anxiety to get to me. So no, I was not the outgoing personality. I think by the time I got to high school, I definitely had opened up a bit and became, more involved with student council and sports and everything that kind of took me out of my shell a little bit. But in those early years, no, I was definitely more the quiet one in the classroom.
But you would say by around high school, you were more outgoing, where it's a lot similar to what you are now today.
Yeah, maybe not quite as much, but I think sports really helped in, playing sports through high school and just kind of building that confidence and being part of a team. But I think really when I became more comfortable in front of people was when I went to Pelotonia. And initially, there were 2 roles that they were hiring for. I remember one was a director of procurement and one was the director of rider recruitment stewardship. And I specifically told them I wanted the director of procurement role, came from a finance background, seemed to make a lot of sense to me. And they said, "Well, we're not offering you that job. You can take it or leave it, but your job is the rider recruitment role." And I remember being traumatized. Like, you mean I have to go stand in front of people, classrooms or, conference rooms full of people and talk to them and try to get them to do this? And they're like, "Yep, that's the option." So, it was definitely one of those things that put me completely out of my comfort zone, but, became more natural and definitely became more comfortable, over the time of doing it. But I think that's where I started to just really realize you can walk in a room of anyone and you can start a conversation with someone and it's going to be okay.
That's good. Yeah, and now I wanted to focus on today, since now you are with your husband running your own team. And I'm interested how you guys approach this current day of marketing yourselves as realtors, especially because you're fairly new in the industry, but you have so many connections. Do you rely solely on the referrals and the connections that you know, or have you done more traditional ways of outreaching to people? Do you go into social media? Do you go into other avenues of meeting people? How do you approach that?
Yeah, I would say a vast majority of our business is referrals and repeat clients at this point. So now that I'm kind of going into my seventh year of real estate, I'm lucky enough to have there are some clients that are on their repeat sale, maybe selling that first home, which is a benefit you don't get in your first few years of real estate because, people are not buying and selling homes every year. So that's been nice to have that repeat business. But then we get just really a lot of referrals, which we're really grateful for. I think that's just the way that we've been very involved in the community through a wide range of aspects, both he and I. Um, I would say we really kind of work that angle. We don't do a lot of the traditional things that real estate agents do. We're not sending mailers to, large communities or farming neighborhoods. We have never bought any leads and we don't really spend a lot on marketing. Just, I think we feel that we'd rather invest time and to build those personal relationships like we talked about as opposed to kind of putting money behind something that, buying an ad here or there. Like we just don't necessarily think that that's really where we're going to get our benefit or kind of get the return on that value. So, yeah, I think that social media is something that we have, we definitely are out there. I think that's one of those things that you can go really far down that path and how many videos and how often you're doing it. And it can get a little overwhelming. So we kind of, have a balance. I think we're doing a decent job at it. We're not,
Mhm.
professionals in any way, shape, or form, but enough out there that people know, real estate is obviously a lot of self promotion. And I really do think if I was in real estate, I probably wouldn't be on social media or try not to be on it because it's uncomfortable constantly
Yeah.
putting yourself out there and talking about a sale you've done. But at the same time, we have so many people that are like, oh my gosh, like your business seems like it's going really well, or oh, I saw that house you sold. That we know we hear it enough that it's worth it to be out there just to make sure our sphere knows, what we're doing and that we are selling and buying homes and that we can help them as well.
How do you balance between your personal life and with real estate? Because you're telling me about all of these connections that you're making outside with the community. How do you balance that with you at home and you with children specifically too?
Yeah. What has been a lot easier since my husband's doing this as well now. So, for instance, I just got back from a quick trip down to visit my parents in Florida. And, that would have been a lot harder to do if I didn't have someone here in Columbus that could handle showings and handle getting people into contract or assisting any of our clients. So, to be able to do those things that prior to him being in real estate has really helped kind of pull off that personal piece and allow me to do more or just to even go out with girlfriends or any of those things. Um, so yeah, I think that, you know, I'm trying to teach myself to be a little bit better about saying no at times.
Mhm.
There's only so much time in the day, and I have a hard time saying no if I have the opportunity to do something or somebody asks to, whether that's for help or a fun thing. So it's just trying to keep top of mind, like what's the most important to me. Like if sitting down to dinner with my family that night is what's most important, then saying no, sorry, I can't make this happy hour, but I'd love to join next time
Mhm.
is becoming, more and more important to me, especially as we realize we only have 10 years left of our girls at home. And that's,
Yeah.
become as much as real estate, selling real estate and, thriving in our career is super important to us. And we have, high expectations of ourselves. We also want to be very cognizant of our family first. Like that is what's most important to us. So, we're really working harder and harder at that. And I think now that he is part of this and we're all kind of moving in the same motion every single day, it's making it a lot easier to make sure that our girls aren't being pushed aside for our business. And it's more, um, it might just look a little less traditional. So if they get home at 3 o'clock every day and we want to, go shoot baskets in the front yard and go for a family walk after dinner, then we're totally fine with once they're in bed. We might have 3 hours of work left to do. But my thought is I could be here working and I'm enjoying that anyways, or we could probably would be sitting on that same couch watching TV or watching a movie. So it's the trade-off that we have. And we'd much rather have those hours together when the girls are awake and then kind of put in some extra time after hours.
Yeah, makes sense. One thing I'm interested in is it's a pretty common belief, and maybe you have heard it. It's don't go into business with your relatives or like your friends. And I'm interested because you got your husband. And how did you guys make that work? Or what is some advice also you would give to realtors that are thinking, hey, maybe I want my spouse in on this?
Yeah. Um, I think that we had kind of had a trial run enough to think that it was going to work, and the fact that he would always ask about the business anyway. So, like, our dinner time conversation or after the girls were in bed, we talked a lot about real estate because he was always so interested in it. Um, and so he kind of I feel like he was already my person when I broke off from my team, that he was the person I would run questions by or thoughts by, or how do you think I should strategize this? And I was just telling him the other day that I feel like by the time he got his license and joined real estate, he already, I felt like, was in it for a year because even things, I mean, you better believe I'd volunteered him many a times over to help my clients prepare their houses. I mean, he'd been staining decks, he would take down blinds, hang pictures, clean garages, like whatever it is, I had already volunteered him into that world. So I feel like we kind of worked together before we ever officially made that decision, at least loosely. Um, and then, I think we just make a really good team in life. I mean, we had twin girls and, props to anyone that's raised a child, but having 2 infants that are premature at
Mm.
the same time crying, if you can survive that together, I think we're like, we can probably survive working together.
Yeah.
And honestly, throughout the day too, that, you know, as he is now up and running, we're not really together all day long. So like, he might be at a showing, I might be at home. Like we're together parts of the day and we do some of our meetings together depending on what they are. But in a lot of ways, we're very independent throughout the day. And then there are portions of time that we come together.
Mm.
So I think that advice to someone thinking about working with a family member is, if there is an opportunity to kind of trial run it or see how that might work before taking the leap. Um, but then I think really just you have to be able to trust that other individual so that you're not, me as being the first one in the business, trying to kind of always be hovering over, and, making sure everything was going right with what he was doing. It just really wouldn't have worked, he would have felt like the lesser, he would have felt like, he wasn't be giving his full chance, so I think just having to have that mutual trust in each other to kind of do their role and do it successfully, because you're both working towards the same goals at that point.
Okay. A quick question. Do you have any other any team members besides your husband?
Not at this point. We're kind of going through that process now about if that's something we would want. I know one thing we do not want is a large team. It's just whether or not if we're interested in having, another individual or two join our team. We're kind of working through that process now. Haven't really made any decisions, but I
Mm.
think that one little one at home, one of our daughters is vying for that spot. We asked the other day, um, what are you saving your money for? And she looked and so confidently, without question, said, to buy my first house. You were like, we're gonna have to hire you soon.
Yeah.
But yeah, so to be determined, I think. But no, nothing we want to jump into necessarily right away.
Yeah, I was just curious because, like, one of the biggest challenges with being a business owner, and I've talked with a lot of realtors about this, they always struggle delegating. Like, now I have to trust my team member, and I have
Yeah.
to trust, and you did that with your husband so well. And I'm wondering if you guys were to have considered another team member, how do you think you would have handled that? Or even how you even learned about that? Because that's like a skill many business leaders struggle with where they can't delegate.
Yeah. And I think I would struggle with that a lot. I think it was different with it being my husband that, we know each other so well, and since we're around the same conversations, like, another team member isn't gonna be, living in your house and, like, hearing every conversation, whereas we kind of feel like without having to verbalize something, the other person kinda knows what they need to do, where they need to take it from there. So it just saves a lot of that, getting somebody up to speed. But I 100% agree. I think that I'm someone who struggles to delegate, yes, and so it would have been very different if it was a different team member that was not, a spouse that you're kind of with every day and on that exact same kind of train.
Mhm. And now I kind of want to move into the future with how do you think you're going to approach real estate as a whole in the next 5 years, 10 years, 20 years with your team and you specifically? Is it get as big as possible with your team? Or, I mean, you already said you don't want to really do that. And I'm curious to see why is that? Or is it you want to see yourself and you and your husband just be growing as much as possible? Like, what is the decision with the future, especially with the team? I'm very interested about that.
Yeah. I think for us, you know, like I said, we're not as focused on like the numbers. It's really about how many people can we help and how much fulfillment we're getting out of the job each and every day. Um, so it's kind of a double-edged sword. I mean, we're not really, like, numbers driven necessarily, but at the same time, we're also very competitive. So I think, like, we're competitive with ourselves and, like, well, we know we wanna get better every single year. Um, but I also don't think that we feel and that's part of the reason we don't feel the need for the bigger team is because we don't care to be, like, the biggest team or have the most sales across our team. It's just not really what we're looking to do, and I think part of that is having just a young family at home and knowing that to grow a team is that gonna be a big time commitment and management investment as well. So I think for us, it's, continuing to grow and I think maybe improving our processes and how do we with when you're running a business, there's if you talk to anyone, they could say 10 different things that anyone recommends you focus on. And it's like, well, gosh, you really have to have your hands in all 10 of those things to be successful, but there's only so much time you have to put into each of those 10 things. So I think for us is to kind of continue to gain efficiencies and bring time back in our day but to still be able to kinda touch all those buckets and do each of them as well as we can. So there's still so much on our list of things that, new partnerships or new avenues that we wanna kind of go down and delve down. So I think for us, it's gonna be finding new paths and new things to keep us excited about, what we could be doing different in our business. And along the way, we have just said the reason we would maybe wanna add, like, a couple team members is really so when we can get away a little bit more peacefully and, like, you know,
Mhm.
right now you go on vacation and you're on vacation, but some people don't care that you're on vacation. That house is still for sale and you still need to stay on top of it. Um, so maybe we can get to the point where, vacation feels a little bit more like vacation. We'll always still be on, we'll always still be working, but, to maybe have a little bit of that break. So I think the next, I could see, like I said, maybe a smaller team in the future, but really just kind of enhancing our business and our services. So, like, if we can find these gain efficiencies, how can we offer an even more premier service to our clients and how can we make them feel even that extra touch? So, kind of still continuing to fine tune of, where we put our hands in our buckets every day and how we keep them all moving along to kind of keep the greater business working.
And now that you talked about how it is your goals and your teams, I'm interested in the state of the industry. How has it changed since you came in 7 years ago? And how do you see it changing in the next couple of years? Do you see yourself changing in an aspect of how you get more clients, focusing more on digital, or do you think it'll still be primarily that relationship, those connections that you make at those community events? How do you see it going on in the future?
Yeah, I think business as a whole, shortly after I started in real estate is when COVID hit, and that obviously changed a lot for everybody. But when you talk to people that have been in business for like 30 years, they're like, well, gosh, well, we lived through the recession and we lived through, X, Y, and Z. And there's always going to be some other new challenge. I mean, we went through the regulatory changes, last year in 2024 with the new real estate laws. And that's something that people had to learn and work through, and our clients are still understanding. Obviously, in mortgage rate increases. So I feel like there's always going to be new challenges, and the industry as a whole is going to be learning through those together. Like when COVID hit, nobody had ever worked through anything like that, even those that have been in the business for decades. So, um, I think that's where you really we're gonna continue to rely on all of our colleagues who are going through that same thing, and that's where kind of networking with those individuals. And trying to figure out, how are you dealing with this challenge and how are you dealing with this? So we really love to stay close with not just people in our brokerage, but just other colleagues that are running great businesses as well. And understand how they're facing different challenges. And, I think I missed the end of that. I went on a tangent there. The rest of that question.
More of how do you think the real estate industry is gonna change in the future?
Okay.
How you approach
Yeah.
clients, do you think it's gonna be still primarily, like, these connections that you make? Or is it
Mm.
now it's gonna be more of, like, digitized where it's like, "Okay, now we're gonna be focusing a lot more on, like, YouTube or something." Or is
Yeah.
it how would you
Yeah,
say?
sorry. Thanks for recapping that. I think for us, it's always going to stay relationship based, just because that's what we really enjoy, like getting out there. And, I really look forward to showings because that means I get to see somebody and connect with them and ask them, how, whether it's been a year or week since they've seen a home, like what's up, what's new with them. So I think that that's where we get so much joy out of it that, you know, maybe it is adding these enhancements. Like I said, maybe we could strengthen our social media channels or whatever that new social media is going to be 5 years from now. Like, we'll make those tweaks, but primarily, I don't think we're ever going to rely on any of that to what's going to be our next business builder. Um, and like I said, I really do see us kind of staying the course of not putting a ton of money into the marketing or not, you know, buying any type of leads or anything like that. It's just not the way that gives us much excitement because that would, a cold lead always feels a little cold to us. But if someone that we never maybe have met, but it was a referral from someone, having that already, intimate connection with them because we have this mutually known person is just such a great start for us. And um, so I do think that we'll probably, I can see that in the long haul. And if anything changes too much, I fear that if it's not as relationship driven, that we might not love our job as much as we do now. So really staying true to kind of what we do now will be our goal for sure.
Do you see any future with you not in real estate in the future where, like you said, if it's, like, less connection based, you would not enjoy it as much.
Yeah,
Would you ever see yourself leaving real estate for something else that's more connection driven, or is it real estate? That's it.
I think this is it. I think this is where we'll be, where we'll end. We laugh a little bit about when that time would come though. And I think my husband knows me pretty well. I'm going to have a hard time ever just like shutting off. I might be one of those agents that's working well past what I would really need to. Maybe slowing down is where we would focus, slowing down some. Um, but I find like it's going to be a hard day to, just at some point think like your business is done because, you go from working such a wild business. It's all hours of the day, every day of the week, and then thinking that that would just end, seems like it would be a really harsh reality for us. So I think I could see us in the future slowing down, but I definitely think that real estate is where it is for us. We did purchase our first investment property this year.
Oh, wow, congrats.
So thank you. Um, I could see that as kind of being an avenue that would maybe, as we get older, kind of take us off to still being engaged in real estate, but not as intense on the day to day as we look to slow down in the future.
Mhm.
But definitely a good learning experience this far and something that we renovated the property. We didn't personally, but we worked with a contractor and we thought, well, this is either going to be a one and done or something we love. And I think we definitely, enjoyed the process. So could see some more of those in our future.
And we're gonna be wrapping up, and I have 2 interesting questions. The first one, it would be about your daughters.
Yeah.
So, you're in this chaotic world of real estate. Would you want them to get into the industry? Like, if they were, like, let's say they're, like, 18 years old, they're like, "Mom, I wanna go and be in real estate."
Yeah.
What would you tell them?
I think I would love it, I think that at this point, we're building a family business, and, they will have seen this for really their whole memorable life at that point growing up to kind of understand what those time commitments are, some of the stressors involved with that, but I would not want them to jump right in at 18. I think you gain so many life experiences. If college is what is next for them and that makes sense for them, I think them going out in their own, maybe even having some real work life experience in a different world first before coming into real estate. As we talked about my journey, I just know that so much of that built like a really good business base for me that I think that could be a really good step, ultimately whatever's going to be best and whatever, their personalities lead to when they're older. But I wouldn't shy them away from it. I think that they'll have, it would feel really good to be able to pass something along to them and kind of get them started on a good foot to owning their own business, and they'll have lived it long enough to understand if it's even something they're interested in. So I could also see them taking the complete opposite and thinking, "There's no way I wanna do what mommy and daddy do."
Would you have any warnings for them? Like, "Hey, yes, you could do it, but think about this, consider this." Do you have any of those? Or would you just be like, you're would be s it just be I mean, it's a business, they would understand it the struggles, but is there
Yeah.
anything specific where you're like, "Just make sure you watch out for this?"
I think I would definitely want them to come learn, the stuff that they're not seeing now, like really shadowing and coming along and making sure they understand, like, this is not probably what your friends are going to be doing. They're probably going to be going Monday to Friday, 8 to 5, 9 to 6, whatever that looks like and more traditional. So you might be working a very different world than your other friends that on nights and weekends, they're looking to be social and out having things. Not that you can't do that, but there might be nights that, your friends are looking to go out on a Thursday and you might have a showing that evening. So I
Mm,
think just making them understand it's probably going to look very different than what their friends might be doing, especially because, most realtors don't start into this career immediately out of college or when they're that young. It's going to, they would need to build up that base, and they'd obviously have a little bit of a leg ahead with some of, leads and stuff from us. But
mhm.
I don't know. It'll be interesting to see, or if it's two of them or if it's one of them, how that might go all shake down.
Yeah, that is interesting. And I wanted to wrap up with this because I really found your story fascinating. Like, I've done a couple of these podcasts, and I really found you fascinating because you jump from college to corporate to nonprofit and now real estate. You were in a team, now you're by yourself
Mhm.
and you're at the top. And a lot of young people really want to get into entrepreneurship. And a lot of times people say, "Oh, don't go to college. Just focus solely on building a business." And I'm interested, what would be your advice for people that are interested in something like that? People that want to build a business, but they don't know what to do and they're at, let's say they're like 18 years old. What would you recommend for them? Because you had that entrepreneurial spirit within you even when you were young.
Yeah.
And yet you went into all of these different facets of life. Would you tell him, jump into as many different things, or is it try to get that business started? How would you recommend for people that are interested?
I mean, I think there are definitely the people that could start a business at that young age without really any real world experience, and we've seen it, and they can succeed incredibly. But I think for someone that knows they want to start a business, but maybe it's just not right at their fingertips yet, I think getting that real world experience is so important. And even if you never plan to work in the, corporate world, having a couple years in the corporate world is so valuable because you see how it works, how the hierarchy works, how the different departments work, and understanding, like we talked about, like when you're that business owner, you're owning all those departments. You are all of those departments. But if you've never really seen it work, I think that you might struggle to fully understand, like, okay, you need to understand the finances and the numbers, like what are your expenses, what is your income, but you also need to understand, like, if you do have team members, like how do you manage your team members, and you also have to understand, there's so many different parts of business that if you choose not to go to college, which is totally fine for some people, you don't have those business classes teaching you that. So I think that real world experience is very valuable. So maybe putting off initiating that business until you can get that corporate experience, corporate or just business in general. Maybe it's working for another startup, or a nonprofit or whatever that may be, but getting real world experience. And, also if you don't have the finances set yet, like making sure you build that buffer because, it's expensive to start a business and depending on what that business is, especially, but you don't want to find yourself, in the first year in, you're struggling to make ends meet because your business hasn't picked up quite yet. But you don't want to give up that first year. So making sure you have kind of that bucket of funds behind you so that you can sustain until your business has enough momentum that it can be sustainable for the long haul. And finding great mentorship as well.
Mhm.
I think somebody else that's been through it that can help, in a more similar avenue of whatever you're looking to do, give you advice so you can help learn from the struggles that they had too. And hopefully, either kind of pivot around those or not have them, affect you quite as hard as they may have that other individual.
How would you approach getting great mentors? I know that was our last question, but I just wanted to ask you this. How would you approach getting a mentor? 'Cause, was it the rough team that was mentoring you?
Yeah, I think that, Marilyn, Jeff, even the team members will always be great mentors for me, and I think a lot of it is, I mean, they run such big businesses that, it's not that we were sitting down and having these independent conversations, but just really watching from, next to them and watching how they're running their business and knowing that they were there to support me all along the way. Um I think for somebody that maybe isn't starting on a team, it's either just your manager in your office, who's at your broker that is, there to meet with you on a regular basis and really talk through, the ideas you have or the challenges you're having. Um, and you want to make sure you have like a good fit with that person. So make sure that you can really feel like you can express yourself and open up and make sure that they're really engaging and giving you the time of the day. So I feel like in real estate, finding that person through your broker is sometimes the most natural because everybody is so, busy that you might find another real estate agent out there that um, could be a great mentor, but really making sure that you're finding the time to engage with them and sit down on a regular basis and talk is a little bit more challenging in real life because they're busy, you're busy, schedules are all over the place. Um, but I think it's really important to do, and or it could be a variety of mentors. So maybe if there's 3 or 4 people that you feel like you've really clicked with, is just making sure you're consistent and meeting with those individuals so that you can help them learn and you can learn from them as well. So I think it could look a little different for everybody. And I find even like a lot of my mentorship and just my colleagues that we have kind of a text chain with some of my girlfriends, and it's mentorship in a different way. We're kind of sharing stories, or I have this need, can you help? And um, kind of like a give and take, but it's helpful to all of us. So it's someone I know I can call and ask a question if I don't know what the next step should be.
Well, Susie, yeah, it was really nice talking to you. I really appreciated this episode and I really liked your insights. And I really thank you for coming out because I understand you're very busy, daughters,
Yeah.
real estate, and being able to come out, share with our audience your story. I love that. And I'll always listen to this podcast just for some advice because I really appreciate it. And I just wanted to say thank you for coming out.
Yeah, well, thank you so much as well. I appreciate you taking the time, and it was great having a conversation with you. And it's always helpful to kind of reflect back on some of these questions that I don't think about, with myself on a daily basis as well.